So how can we live our lives full of love, connection, generosity, and allow that to spread out into the world around us? So this is the second episode of a 6-week series where we are looking at how we can work directly on our minds through meditation to help bring about the changes that we would like to see around us. So these episodes stand alone, you can just drop into them or you can tune in for the whole series. So a very warm welcome to you this evening, particularly if it's your first time tuning in. My name is Charlotte and I'm a teacher here at the Brixton Buddhist community, coming to you from our studio. We have a lively chat room on these live streams, so why don't you go on there now and tell us who you are and where you're coming in from, and I'll find out who that is in a few minutes and do some shout outs and hellos to you. And if you're watching this in the future after the video has been streamed, then don't forget to click the subscribe and the alert button so you can follow our events in the future. So last week we started to look at how we can start slowing down our responses, slowing down our minds a bit to see our internal responses a bit more clearly. And we also looked at how we can move our attention between ourselves and another person, noticing our responses to each other and wishing each other well. And these are important foundations for positive communication and change. And in this week, what we're going to do is look at how we can gather together the bits of ourselves that are sometimes in conflict, so we have more freedom and energy to live our lives according to our values. One of the barriers to just getting to know ourselves better is we just don't take the time to kind of slow down and take a moment. So what we're going to do now is do a bit of a body awareness practice just to check in with ourselves, and then we'll do some hellos to see who's joining us this evening. So if you just want to get yourselves ready for a period of meditation for probably about 8 minutes, and you don't need to be in any sort of particular posture, just something that's comfortable where your body feels steady and you're upright. And if you're comfortable doing so, you can then close your eyes. And just taking a moment to notice what it feels like to turn inwards. So this might be the first time today or for a few days that we've done this, that we've checked in with ourselves. And noticing if that feels a bit strange or a bit weird. And taking a deeper breath in and out. Do that for a few cycles just to help slow down the breath, indicating to the mind that it can start to calm down. Now start noticing the contact of your body with whatever it's sat on. So be our bums on a chair or a cushion or a sofa. Noticing what our feet are in contact with, our legs. Seeing if we can notice the sense of the heaviness of our bodies, of our weight dropping into the chair, into the ground. And then coming up from the sitting bones, from the pelvis, just moving up the back of our bodies, so our lower back, up to our shoulders, as we go past noticing the back of our rib cage, just seeing if you can notice perhaps any tightness in the shoulders, either pulling up or straining forward. Coming up to the neck. Might want to give your head a little bit of a wiggle from side to side and back and forth, just to see how your head is resting on top of the spine. Coming around the back of the head, around the skull. Notice the sensations in our face. Do we notice any tightness around the eyebrows, the eyes, the jaw, the mouth? If you do, just getting curious about those sensations. What do they actually feel like? See if they can relax a little bit more, allowing the muscles and the skin to hang heavy. Allowing the eyeballs to hang heavy in the sockets, so we're not straining our eyes. Moving down the front of our body, so into our throats, into the chest area. Perhaps you can notice the rise and the fall of the breath here. And skimming over our collarbones to our shoulders, and working our way down both of our arms into the armpits, the tops of our arms, down to the elbows, our forearms, and into the hands. So perhaps there's feelings of warmth in the palm of our hands. You can notice if they're touching anything, maybe your legs. And get a sense of your individual fingers. And perhaps the spaces in between the fingers as well. So moving back up the arms, up through the wrists, all the way up to the shoulders, across the collarbones again, into the chest. And moving down the front of the body, so to the rib cages, maybe noticing how they stretch around to our sides. While the sides of our bodies moving with the breath. Then coming down into the belly. Is there any tightness here, or holding? And just seeing if we can breathe more deeply into the belly. Expanding our awareness out to the whole of our breathing bodies, just seeing how much of the whole of your experience you can take in. You've got a sense of all these physical sensations in the body. You might notice any kind of overall emotional tone to your experience right now. Any thoughts that have been popping up while we've been doing this, just letting them pass through the mind. Now letting go of trying to do anything at all, let go of any sense of trying to meditate. And I'll ring the bell now just to end that practice. Great, so welcome. Yeah, to those of you who maybe just been joining, my name is Charlotte. I'm one of the teachers here at Brixton Buddhist Community. And I'm just going to go over to the chat room now and say hello to whoever has dropped their name and location into the chat. So if you haven't done that, go and do that now so I can say hello to you. So we have Jill, hey Jill from Gypsy Hill, Joe Shields as well. We've got Louise calling in from West Dulwich, Pam from Upper Norwood. We've got my dad John who's calling in near Cambridge. He's out in his truck again this evening. Hello, it's particularly nice to have you here. And then we've got Yanis from Wandsworth as well, who said my name is pronounced as Yanis. Thank you, Yanis, it's really helpful to have. And then we've got Alex from Clapham Junction, and Alex and Brozek as well. From Stockwell, Maitri Nara, who's in the room next door too. Great, yeah, so do keep dropping your names in for anyone else I haven't seen. Oh yeah, there we go. David from sunny Margate. Excellent, I hope you're having a good day. Nice to have you here, David. Great, yeah, so keep dropping them in. Oh, yeah, there's some at the top too. I've missed them. Oh, I've missed my mum. Hello, mum. That would be very bad to miss you. That's Linda Beasley on there. And Ian as well from Hither Green. Great. Oh, gosh, yeah, they keep coming in. Diana from Loughborough Junction. Yeah, mum, you're there too. Great. Lovely to have you here. Yeah. So I'll just kind of launch straight in with this evening. And I thought what I just wanted to talk about for a few moments is what do we mean about when we say we're trying to change the world? So the title of this series is Change Your Mind, Change the World. And what do we really mean by that? What's the kind of way in? And I think it's important that we are aware of the direction that we're trying to move ourselves in. So the focus for this series is a meditation practice called the Metta Bhavana. So that's two Pali words that roughly translate as loving kindness. And it's a practice for overcoming hatred towards ourselves and others. Hatred in its various kind of shades and tones and degrees. So part of what we're doing in that practice is we're acknowledging that we and other people exist from our own sides, that we've got our own kind of desires that are common between us, that we all want happiness, we all want to be able to grow, we all want to be free from suffering. And then on the basis of kind of noticing that kind of shared human experience, we can wish that for each other, we can wish that we can have those things. And then for kind of, if we take a bit of a deeper perspective for the practice, we can start seeing that we're also just not fixed and separate and permanent in the way that we usually experience ourselves and other people. And from that point of view, when we can be in touch with that point of view, then kind of hatred really isn't kind of possible in the same way anymore, or at least when we're kind of living from that perspective. But of course, for most of the time where we're at, we just need to acknowledge that hatred in its various degrees and kind of forms does exist, and we experience it, and we can also contribute it, we can cause it, perhaps quite directly, and sometimes intentionally, but also sometimes indirectly or without kind of having the kind of self-awareness. That's what we're doing. I just think I'll go over to the chat room as well. I can see a few more people have. Oh yeah, my mum says I'm forgiven for not noticing that she's here. Thank you very much, Mum. So what gets in the way of us really trying to overcome this hatred in ourselves and in the world around us? And well, the part of the story is that really with this kind of like bunch of different, sometimes conflicting habits and tendencies, and we've all got kind of different wants and desires that can pull us in different directions. And a lot of the time we're just kind of unaware that that's what's going on. So we might have the kind of best intentions to live our life a particular way. And the next thing we know, we're just kind of trying to numb out our experience by watching Netflix for hours and hours at the weekend. So there's nothing inherently wrong with doing that, but it's perhaps how sometimes we might be not looking at some part of our lives that we find a bit uncomfortable and go to these other things to kind of deal with it. So one thing we're going to do a bit later on is I'm going to introduce us to an adaptation of the Metta Bhavana in its 5 traditional stages as a way of getting to know ourselves better and exploring ourselves. So for those of you who don't know, the 5 traditional stages, in the first 4 stages, they involve us bringing to mind different people. So in the first stage, it's ourselves, then a friend, then someone we're kind of aware of but aren't kind of particularly connected to, so a stranger, or someone we don't know particularly well. And then in the 4th stage, someone that we are having a bit of difficulty with. And in those first 4 stages, just using our imagination to bring these people to mind, notice what our response is to them, including ourselves. And from that place of awareness, making a sort of choice to develop, have an intention of kindness and well-wishing towards them. And then in the 5th stage, what we do is we bring all of those people together, have a sense of equalising our attention and intention of well-wishing to all 4 of them, and to start including more and more categories of people, more and more categories of life. So I thought we'd play around with a technique that I learned once on I think it was a meditation retreat, where we just slightly adapt the stages to explore different sides of ourselves. So in the first stage, it's kind of a bit more of a landing stage. We're just kind of coming into the meditation practice. But then in the 2nd stage, instead of bringing to mind a friend, we bring to mind something about us that we like. Then in this 3rd stage, a bit of ourselves that we're kind of just about aware of, but maybe a little bit unconscious of or not particularly connected to. And then in the 4th stage, a part of ourselves that we don't particularly like, or a habit or tendency that we don't particularly like. And then in the 5th stage, we bring all these to mind, getting a sense of the wholeness of ourselves. And then we start bringing to mind other people around us, in our lives, in the world around us, with this kind of bigger perspective that we're all made up of these kind of bundles of helpful and unhelpful habits and tendencies. So we can do this. We do get to know ourselves better, definitely we do, when we just use the traditional practice. But I just thought it'd be, I find it quite a helpful way of bringing a bit of focus towards some different aspects of myself. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw out just a few thoughts I've been having based on some things I've been reading and listening to about the kind of the different stages and how we might relate to them. And then after that, I'll lead us in a practice that will be hopefully be accessible to you, whether or not you've ever done the practice before, and you can just treat it as a bit of an experiment to see where you go with it. And if you have done this practice quite a few times before, hopefully it adds just a different dimension to when you do the traditional form. Great. Okay. So as I said, in the first stage, we're just sort of settling into our bodies, getting a sense, a bit like we did just now, of just awareness of ourselves, coming into the body, noticing how we're thinking, how we're feeling, maybe noticing areas of tension or areas that we feel a bit cut off from. And then in the second stage, we bring to mind a bit of ourselves that we like, perhaps a side of ourselves that brings us some kind of joy, an element of our character that we might be quite proud of. And this is usually the friend stage. And I think it's really important to do this, and it's important to do this at this point in the practice. Because I think it's really easy for some of us to over-identify with the habits that we have that we find quite difficult. Or sides of us that we have a less positive relationship with. We need to kind of see that we these kind of areas of ourselves that we maybe don't like quite so much aren't our whole experience. They're not fixed. They don't. They're not us. They're not the whole of us. And we need to kind of access our passions, our values, our good qualities too, because this is where we can draw energy from to inspire us and kind of move us forward in our lives. And so I know, talking to other people that I've met in our classes, and throughout my practice, I know that some people find this really hard. They can find it really hard to think about something about themselves that they like. And if that's you, that's okay. Just notice that that's your experience in this particular moment. Maybe it wouldn't be if you were doing it tomorrow. And you can just kind of feel it in the body. What does that feel like to not be connected with a part of you, a sense of having something positive about you right now? You could maybe think about something that a friend would say, or even just bring to mind the fact that you do look after yourself. You try to look after other people as best you can, whether that's your families or work colleagues, whatever. And it's from this basis of a kind of basic foundation of self-worth that and positive emotion, that we can then move on to the next stages in the practice, what we might find a little bit more challenging. So then we get into the third stage, the stranger, or possibly something that we're not particularly connected with. So I'm going to do a little bit of a shout out to Maitreya Bandhu, who wrote this book called The Journey and the Guide, which looks at what we're looking at this evening really is what we call integration. He talks about it in this book, The Journey and the Guide, which we can recommend. And one of the areas that he talks about is our blind spots. So we can have blind spots, and we can have blind spots to things that can cause us and other people harm. And there can be other bits of ourselves that we're cut off from, that we're not particularly conscious of, that also could be really positive, or just neither. A bit of our character that's not really got any kind of ethical component to it. It's just something about who we are, something and some element of our identity. So just give a few of my thoughts about that based on some other things I've been reading this week. And they're not kind of comprehensive about this area, but just to give us a little bit more material to work with. So I think one of the reasons why there are these areas of ourselves that we're not so connected with is that we can have a fixed idea about who we are, what kind of person we are, and what kind of person we aren't. It's a kind of story about ourselves that will start kind of excluding different elements of our habits and kind of behaviours and actions. And I think it's particularly important to look at this in the context of this kind of series of looking at how we change the world. So I do still, but I've really identified as someone who's kind of like out there trying to do some good, be a kind of positive force in the world. And there's definitely elements of that. But I also really have to make sure and check that I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, somewhere sort of beyond reproach. It might come as a surprise to you, but not to my friends, and not to my family, and certainly not to my boyfriend, that I get angry. Now, anger, particularly from a Buddhist perspective, there's nothing inherently problematic about it. It's just a mental state that kind of arises. But it's much more about like what we do with it once it's arisen, when it comes up and we're feeling anger towards someone else, what happens then? What do we do next? Do we kind of feed it and let it kind of let ourselves kind of like lash out in the world? And based on a kind of few comments from close friends of mine about what happens when I flip out, the few times that I do, thankfully I don't think it's that often anymore, but it does happen sometimes. And I have now labelled it, very Naga might laugh, as the sledgehammer of self-righteous anger. Yeah, so I've got a lot of kind of emotional build up. I've got this idea that I'm not an angry person because I'm really nice and I'm just trying to help the world and help people around me and, you know, just doing all this good stuff. But this kind of like self-righteousness kind of like builds up, and so just maybe communicate about something a bit more normally. And then it'll kind of like come out in a kind of like quite verbal sledgehammer format to probably some quite unsuspecting friends who are close to me. Yeah, so that can be an issue if we've got a fixed idea of who we are and we don't look at these kind of slightly more shadowy sides of ourselves. But we also might have very positive aspects of ourselves that are things that we can draw energy from and power from for good. You know, a sense of emotional strength, confidence, kindness, joy. But perhaps we haven't given ourselves a chance for these to like really emerge very strongly. And there's something quite interesting that we can do around, or notice around who we're attracted to, yeah, who we find ourselves in romantic relationships with. Because I certainly find that quite often what we do is we tend to get attracted to people who we at least think exhibit qualities that we feel we might be a bit lacking, yeah. And kind of said instead of kind of really fully owning that for ourselves and developing those fully in ourselves, we kind of well, we often refer to people as our better half, don't we? So there's a sense that we're kind of lacking something and that other person kind of fulfills something for us. Yeah, so if you're trying to get a sense of maybe something that you're not quite so connected to, maybe have a think about who it is that you're sexually attracted to or you're in a romantic relationship with, and what is it about them that maybe you could develop a bit more in yourself. Yeah, and then again, there might be bits of ourselves that've got nothing really to do with kind of ethics. Yeah, there's nothing that we can really do about it. It's just part of ourselves. For example, who we're sexually attracted to, but we might be a bit unconscious of that. Yeah. So quite often people aren't as heterosexual as they say they are when they get surveyed. Yeah, but it's not anything that we necessarily need to do anything about. Yeah, so we have fixed ideas about ourselves, but then of course people around us and society around us can have a fixed idea of who we are and how we should be in the world for different kinds of categories of people. And yeah, based on some of the things I've been reading and thinking about recently, just sort of becoming a bit more aware again, or a bit more in focus around the power of rejection, the possibility of rejection from the groups and communities that we belong to. So depending on what it is in a certain context, it can be more or less dangerous for us to express certain parts of ourselves, to even recognise certain parts of ourselves and allow that expression in the world around the people that we're kind of in a group in. And we're just really social beings, aren't we? Like, we can't really survive. We certainly can't survive as babies without help from other people. And despite our best efforts, and as we've been learning, we can't survive without other people around us as adults either. So it could be that we are kind of unconsciously conforming to group norms for a perceived or actual sense of safety and belonging. Yeah. And that means then we can kind of repress certain sides of ourselves, certain thoughts, feelings, or emotions, and maybe not be so aware that we're doing it. And yeah, for example, I was just thinking of, you know, we can often use that phrase like man up, or, you know, tell a guy that he needs to grow a pair. And what is that really about, actually? You know, part of it is that we're not giving men permission to have their kind of own emotional space, to have a sense of their own kind of like vulnerability, you know, to kind of not conform to maybe traditional ideas of masculinity. And well, I'm sure that's probably got something to do with the high rates of suicide within groups of certain men. Yeah, so that's something that we're concerned about. Yeah, and then women, yeah, I'm sure we have that too, that feels like there's certain sides of ourselves that we can express. Anger in particular, I think it's one of the things I've been struggling with over the last few years as I've become more aware of it is, you don't want to come across as the crazy bitch, do you? Who's being too emotional. Was it a few years ago that David Cameron told someone in the Commons that she needed to calm down, dear? Yeah, so there's kind of bits of ourselves that we might not feel we can bring in. And then, of course, if you're transgender or you don't identify as a man or woman, maybe you're gender non-binary or more kind of fluid, actually probably you're just fighting for your existence to be acknowledged, to be heard. Yeah. So there's kind of some of the stuff around things that we might be like a little bit aware of or totally unconscious of. We often talk about unconscious bias as well. Yeah, just things that we just have no kind of understanding of that are going on in ourselves. A bit trickier to bring those out in a meditation, as we'll find out, because normally what it needs is for someone else to point it out to us or be interested in exploring those areas and doing a bit of our own research. And then in the fourth stage, we go on to something about ourselves that we don't particularly like. So this can take up a lot of our energy, dealing with these aspects of ourselves that we don't like. And it might be that something emerges in the third stage and the previous stage that you take into the fourth. So I think it's just good to clarify something about the kind of ethical content of the thing that you might not like about yourself. So, it's a very positive emotion. It's a really positive thing to be able to experience remorse for something that we've done that's caused harm to ourselves or others, and that's quite different from a kind of sense of guilt. Kind of remorse is something about falling short of our values. Falling short of our values. And we can just acknowledge, that's happened, and eventually we might want to take some sort of action about it. We might need to apologise to someone, and that can be really, really freeing. Yeah, to try and make up with someone that we might have caused some suffering to. The awareness is key. Yeah. And then there might be something about ourselves that's just not an ethical issue at all. It might be kind of hatred that we've received from outside ourselves that we've kind of internalized and believed to be true. And often it's just about nothing that we can do about ourselves. It might be to do with class or where we're from, our accent, where we're born, our education. And I've just been thinking a lot quite recently about how we kind of attack each other's bodies. There's a lot of body objectification, of shame and hatred towards different kinds of bodies. So just thinking about things like, fat shaming that can go on in the media. Like I grew up looking at women, like girls and women's magazines that were constantly going on about like how much someone in the public domain weighed, whether she'd lost weight or put on weight or whatever. So that's one thing that we can do, that they're sort of directing hatred towards the body. For women, we do not talk about our menstrual cycles in public. That's considered a dirty thing to do. There's still a lot of shame around kind of the female body. I'm sure the guys kind of experience their own side of it. I'm just going to quickly flag up a book called Naomi Wolf, Vagina, a New Biography, if you want to look into that a little bit more. And then of course we have things like racism as well, and these things can be like pervasive and systemic. So they're not just this is a kind of hatred that's just like a very strong patterning in society, a strong kind of collective behaviours. And to explore some of these areas that we find difficult about ourselves, we might need just more supportive conditions. We might need to be able to talk to people who've had a shared experience. It's not necessarily the best place to be working with them in meditation, at least not at the beginning, if we maybe get overwhelmed with some of those kind of feelings and thoughts. And also, I think sometimes we just need a bit more like joy, love and celebration in our lives. I think you can get that kind of feeling of like, I've got to like work on my stuff and like look inwards. We've got a particular kind of model, I think, in some cultures of self-development that's very kind of inward looking. But actually, I know a lot of people, and myself actually, sometimes we just need to kind of celebrate ourselves a little bit more. I've been listening to a woman, a singer called Lizzo, that's Lizzo, on YouTube, and she just sings very from a place of real kind of like joy and love about her body and other people. And then in the fifth stage, so we're bringing to mind all these four kind of areas. Getting aware of the wholeness of ourselves, all these parts that we like, dislike and disconnected from, and we're kind of wishing ourselves in that, and then we start to take in more and more people. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to lead us. It's kind of more of like a meditation reflection, yeah. So and just see what pops up. Even if you've been doing metta practice for a long time, it's probably might be the first time that you've done this, unless you're on one of the retreats that I've done, where it got used. And yeah, I'll just lead us through the different stages, and each time. Yeah, Mum says this practice will be interesting. Yeah, see what comes up. Each time we're just gonna see what comes to mind. Just see the first thing that comes to mind, and we're just gonna see what the experience is of that in the body. What's our relationship to that thing coming up? Just explore if any tension comes into the body, any unpleasant or pleasant sensations, any numb sensations, and we're just becoming aware of it. That's all we're doing. It's just kind of yes, just been an experiment to see what comes up. So yeah, again, like we did before, if you can get into meditation posture to do this, or just get yourself comfortable. My dad is going to be in the truck, so I hope you're comfy. He has like a really good cab actually, so I'm sure he's in a really good chair right now. It's probably more comfortable than I am. Yes, just get yourself set up. We'll meditate for kind of like 15 or so minutes. Might be a bit longer. Yeah, so in this first stage, it's a kind of landing stage. Yeah, so we are kind of like what we did before, really. Just coming inwards, noticing what it feels like to be us in our bodies. Got the contact with whatever we're sat on. Weight dropping down into the chair, into the ground. And the spine's moving upwards. Taking a deeper breath in and out. Noticing the sensations of breath in the body. There are any areas in the body that you're tightening around so that the breath is restricted. It could be around the shoulders or the tummy or the throat. Just noticing that. Just taking a moment to acknowledge that we are complex beings, full of different desires and habits. And these have arisen out of really complex conditions as well that can't be reduced to anything, any sort of particular thing. So now to see what happens if you try to bring something to mind about you that you like. It might be a specific thing that you've done recently, or it might be a kind of general quality about you. So you might have some thoughts or images associated with that. You might have a memory. Just see if you can see if there are any connected sensations in the body when you bring that to mind. You can notice those sensations. Perhaps they feel pleasurable. Sense of warmth or release. If so, just stay with those sensations. And perhaps they might grow a bit in the body, might spread out to other areas. What's happening now in the body? Are you still in touch with those sensations? Now moving on to the third stage. See if you're aware of part of yourself, maybe a habit or a quality about yourself that you're less connected with. Yes, and it might be a certain kind of emotion that you might feel that you haven't been given permission before to really feel in the body. Yeah, so feelings they're just feelings in the body. Just because we're feeling them doesn't mean we need to act on them, doesn't make us a particular kind of person. We can just experience them in the body. If you find that a bit hard to connect to, maybe just think about what is it that you admire in other people, or maybe that you're attracted to in a partner. Maybe that's a quality that you feel is less developed in yourself. What would it feel like to for that to be more fully expressed in you? So again, you might have a memory pop up, or there might not be anything going on at all. That's just fine. That's just fine. And just see what you can feel in the body. Now letting that fade for now, and before we go on to the next stage, just connect in with how you're doing. See if there's any new tension in the body. Maybe check around our throat, our chest and our belly. And if you have found yourself tensing up, just taking a deeper breath in and allowing the body to relax a bit more on the out breath. Now what we'll do in the fourth stage is, if we're feeling up for it, we'll move on to an aspect or a part of ourselves that we're aware that we don't particularly like. Yeah, but if you've had some strong kind of emotions and thoughts come up in the previous stage, or if they start coming up in this stage, and at any point it starts feeling a little bit overwhelming, that's not the point of the practice at all. So don't worry about staying with it. Perhaps just notice how you're feeling in the body, and perhaps go back to the second stage where you're tapping into something about yourself that you like, yeah, and that you're proud of. If you feel yeah, you're up for it, let's go into the fourth stage, and yeah, just see if we can be honest a bit about a bit of ourselves that we yeah, maybe don't like, maybe feel some shame around. Now noticing, is it something that actually has got some kind of genuine ethical content to it? Perhaps you do feel like you've fallen short of the values that matter to you, and yeah, we could just acknowledge that it's a positive thing to recognise that we might have harmed ourselves or someone else. Just see what that feels like in the body. Or it might be something that we can't do anything about. It's just something about who we are that we've received criticism for, hatred for. What does that feel like in the body? Maybe we tighten up. Just see what happens when we stay aware of the physical sensations associated with this in the body. And maybe we just want to take a deep breath in and allow that tension to release if it can. So now in the final stage, we're just going to bring to mind all these aspects of ourselves together. Yeah, so that we like, that we felt a bit unconnected with, and something that we don't like. Just bring them all to mind. So these are all kind of parts of ourselves, and they're not fixed, they're not the whole of our experience, but they're there. just as there are lots of different other aspects to us as well. We can start bringing to mind other people that we know who must be the same. They must also have these different things about themselves that they like, are disconnected from, or can't see, they also dislike. We've all got these bundles of habits and tendencies in us. That's the same for everyone. So bring to mind people that we like and we love, people that we find more difficult. They might also sometimes be the people we love. Yeah, and all those other people in the world that we don't know. Not just relaxing any effort around this at all, just having a few moments, connecting with our breath and our bodies, not trying to do anything at all. And I'll ring the bell to bring the practice to a close. Great, so I hope that gave you something to kind of play around with. I'd be interested to know about anything that came up with you, any questions you have about the practice or anything that I've been talking about so far. And yeah, while you're doing that, so do get on and go into the chat room and put down anything that's coming up, anything you're kind of exploring that you're happy to share around. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to invite you to well, help our community to grow and to thrive. I should have a little piece of paper. Ah, it's over here. Great. So every session that we do, we run a Dana appeal. So Dana means generosity. It kind of is the kind of lifeblood of our community, really, this sense of kind of flow of energy and resources between ourselves. So all of us here work as I'm working as volunteer. Do have a couple of paid members of staff, and yeah, and of course we need to pay them, and we'd also like to be able to do more things, but of course these things cost money. So I think somewhere appearing on my left shoulder now is our Dana-ometer, which hopefully also has some sparkles this week. Yes, sparkles are going, excellent. Good technical wizardry. So I'd just like to say a really, really big thank you, because we've reached over £2,000 this month. It's how much we are trying to raise every month. Yeah, and a big thank you to Rob and Giannis for doing that. And what I'd just like you to do tonight is just consider setting up a monthly standing order for next month if you can. So we have about £450 coming in with monthly standing orders, and the more of the £2,000 a month that we can raise through the standing orders, basically the more that well, we can just project better into the future and help the team be a bit less concerned all the time about our finances. Will help us kind of relax a little bit more and kind of focusing on bringing all this content to you. Great, yeah, so thank you very much, and for anyone who donates, and the information for how to do that will be below in the information section, so you can click on that. And yeah, it's just going to see if there are any kind of questions or comments now from anyone coming in. I haven't got any at the moment, so yeah, do feel free to get onto those, and there'll be space to talk about them in the Zoom discussion at the end. I just thought I'd also just tell you about some of the books that I've been reading. So I use lots of different resources to kind of help think about these sessions. And one of the main books I'm reading at the moment to help through the different things is a book, as I said earlier on, called The Journey and the Guide, a practical course in enlightenment by Maitreya Bandhu. So we've been focusing on a section. I've drawn some stuff from his section on integration this week, and next week we'll be looking a little bit more at positive emotions. That's a book I can recommend. Great, yeah, my mum Lynn said she really enjoyed my talk. Thank you, Mum. And the variation of the metta bhavana, and she'll try and explore this further. Yeah, I think it opens up quite a few interesting things that we might not always draw out in the traditional practice. Another book that I've been reading lately has been Naomi Wolf, Vagina, a New Biography, recommended by a friend of mine called Lottie. And a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we were on an online retreat together, one run by Loka, which is a women's retreat centre in Wales. And it was on ethics, and it was on friendship, sex, and something. Anyway, we talked a lot about sex and women's relationship to sex and their bodies, and she recommended this book, so I've been looking at that. I've also been reading The First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns, which has just come out this year actually, and I think that's really good just to connect with some women's voices, a whole range of different lives of women who went forth and became the Buddha's disciples. Says that. And then a book I'm coming back to at the moment that I read last year along with a few others is a book called Safe on Black British Men Reclaiming Space. So I've found that really helpful, not just to kind of understand some perspectives and voices that don't normally get that much don't get that much time and space, but also it's been really helpful to understand a bit more about myself, particularly as a kind of white British woman, and some of the dynamics of that can come into kind of relationships with Black British men as well. So I don't think this is a book just about understanding other people. It's a book that if we reflect on, we can understand something about ourselves as well. So I'd really recommend that one too. Great. Thank you, Jill. You said it's been beautifully led. Excellent. Thank you very much. So a couple of announcements for this week. So the next live stream that we've got going on is with a really fab woman called Dharma Mega, who used to live in South America. Really, really impressive woman. And she's going to give a talk. She's going to be interviewed, I think, by Virya Naga, who's an excellent interviewer, I must say, on Wednesday on the topics on how to live a successful life, or what is success, something around that area. So I'm sure that'll be a really engaging evening. And so that's starting at 7:30 again on YouTube. So you can get the details for that are online. And then on Saturday, every fortnight, it's every other Saturday, we have a session starting at 10:30 run via Zoom called Drop in Dharma, where an experienced teacher from our community kind of puts forward something, some kind of aspect of the Buddha's teachings, and then we'll get into discussion about what it kind of really means and whether we feel it's relevant or not to our lives at the moment. So there's that. And then finally, I'd just really like to invite you onto the Zoom call. So after these Monday evenings, after we've done the live stream, we go and get a cup of tea, have a pee, do whatever we need to, have a bit of a stretch. And there's a bunch of us who, and including new people who are joining every week, we meet at 8:45. So the Zoom link is in the information below. And it's just an opportunity just to listen to other people and talk about our own what came up for us in this session. And I find them really, really engaging sessions. I love hearing different people's perspectives. So if you haven't joined one of those before, but you've got the time, would like to do it tonight, I just really encourage you to come along. Just come and let us know who you are. We won't bite. If you want to, you can just kind of listen in for the first one. You don't feel like you need to kind of have anything sort of particular to say. So lovely to see you join us for that in about 15 minutes if you can make it. So I think that's it for now. I'm going to look over to Virinaga to hopefully give me a nod that I haven't forgotten anything major that I meant to announce. And yeah, we'll see you next week. For those of you who do know the traditional stages of the practice, you'll start you'll start noticing a bit of a pattern. So next week we're going to go more into stuff that's related to kind of the second stage of relating to kind of positive emotion and joy and connection with others. Yeah, so that's what we'll be doing next week. Okay, so lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll catch you next week. So take care, and we'll see you then.